Hello and welcome to the ID Talk podcast. I'm Alex Perala. I'm here with my co-host, Tony Bitsionis. Hello, Tony.
Hello, Alex.
And we're very happy to welcome this week Kim Sutherland from LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
So normally the best place for us to start is just to ask you, so that we don't mess things up, to just let us know what's your role at LexisNexis Risk Solutions and your kind of like professional background, how you got to this position.
Okay, well, I have been a part of LexisNexis Risk Solutions for nearly 19 years. It'll be 19 in July,
Oh,
in a variety of roles from product management and product strategy and market strategy. I'm currently the global head of fraud and identity for our business services. So my team and I are responsible for helping to evolve the product portfolio that we offer and to address the needs of our customers from fraud detection, fraud prevention, identity management, authentication, and really understand the broader marketplace and threat landscape. How I got to this position, well, 19 years, like I said.
yeah.
When I first started, it was really kind of an emerging area for a lot of businesses. But I come at this from a number of angles, one from a technology standpoint, technology management, but also from a policy standpoint. So I really first entered this space really looking at it from how do I improve the experience for consumers, and had the opportunity to really immerse myself and help our customers.
Yeah, if 19 years, you've seen like all the serious threats that we talk about now have kind of emerged in that time in terms of like digital fraud. So you've seen it firsthand, it sounds like.
Definitely seen a lot of changes. Seen the way that consumers, you and I, are interacting go from slightly remote to being almost always remote.
Mhm.
And just the evolution of the types of fraud attack vectors that exist. They're constantly changing. It's just an area that never stays still, which is why it's always so interesting and at the same time so challenging for businesses.
Yeah, I'm curious to know like a little bit more about how that perspective has evolved from your position over time. Because like for us, this brand, our media brand, we used to be called Fine Biometrics. It was started 20 years ago, 20 plus. I don't know, Tony, you might know the exact number.
23. I don't remember what year we were in
But
right
it
now.
was it was shortly after 9/11,
Hmm.
and it was like biometric tech was taking off, and there were all these new security threats people were worried about. And just naturally over the years, it became more and more focused on digital security threats. And the companies we pay attention to got more focused on that. And it got to a point where now that's like kind of the key focus area for us. So yeah, I know for LexisNexis Risk Solutions, we've been covering your news for years, and definitely in the last couple of years, there have been acquisitions that have been very focused on biometrics and identity security that made kind of big splashes. So I know a couple of years ago, I believe there was BehavioSec was acquired. Yeah, the behavioral biometrics company. And then last fall, there was you acquired IDVerse or announced the acquisition of IDVerse. So I'm curious how like what would you say is the worldview or the view you see of the digital threats that is driving those acquisitions? Like, what's the rationale behind it?
Yeah, so our first involvement in really taking into consideration the digital attributes and digital risk started around 2015, 2016, actually.
Mm.
We first had partnered with a company called ThreatMetrics. In 2018, we acquired ThreatMetrics because we saw the importance of being able to not just focus on the physical identity, so things like your name, address, social security number, date of birth, that was important, right? Verifying those personal attributes, but also understanding the risk around the device that you use, and where that device is, that transaction is coming from. As more and more people first started shifting to smartphones, because there was a time when phones weren't so smart, So shifting to smartphones, really using their phone and being empowered by businesses to be able to do a lot more self-service and higher risk activities. That was a great thing for businesses as they found a way to be able to offset some of the in-person transactions and having staff have to do everything for a consumer. And consumers really liked it as well, right? So that independence. And back when it was a big deal to think about you could 24/7 have access to your banking account.
Uh-huh.
As all those things really shifted, which seemed like, no one remembers what it was like even before then now. But that's when we really doubled down on the importance of incorporating digital attributes and digital intelligence. That shifted even more as we wanted to understand not just the device that you use, but the email address and the risk around that. So that's our email age acquisition. And then we further expanded that with behavior sec, as you mentioned. And that helped us understand how you interact with that device and allowed us to really look at, is it a human or a bot? Or is it the same person that's transacting? And being able to understand more about the interrelationship between not just the device and the risk around it, but multiple people sharing the same device. So we've always, we spent a lot of time really trying to understand how consumers interact and how to make the process safer, but also not impact the customer experience, which is a big challenge that businesses try to face, trying to balance that security and convenience factor.
Mm.
So that's the digital side, but there's
Okay.
also the physical side. And so we've made, several inroads there as well. We've continued to innovate in this space through our own development of capabilities, acquisition of data elements, and then also acquiring ID analytics, also around the same time that we acquired Email Age. And then the last acquisition that you did mention, because we definitely believe that there are things that we can build on our own. There's things we can partner with, but we also are a strong believer in buying the capabilities when that is the best approach. We just a little over a week ago announced that we completed the acquisition of IDVerse for our document authentication and biometric authentication.
Yeah, I don't know how much you can go into this, but I am curious, like what with these acquisitions, and I guess just with like implementing new security technologies in general, what is driving the process? Is it like, do you have a team that is constantly doing research and coming to you being like, we need to address this and that, or like, is it clients saying, I need a solution to this problem? Like, what actually drives it? Because it's like kind of a fast pace of acquisitions and R&D, it seems like.
Yeah, it's all of the above. It's really important to understand how the market is evolving, how technology is changing, and how consumers are wanting to adopt technology. Because I always say it's so important to adopt things that consumers will use. It's very different if you're trying to deal with employees. You can really dictate to an employee what they have to do.
Mhm.
Consumers don't feel the same way at all. They'll just go work at, they'll go to a different business. So we try to pay attention to the behaviors of consumers. We listen to our customers extensively to understand the challenges they face, the needs that they have, how they're evolving their business, if they're shifting more globally, to make sure that our solutions are addressing not just the current country or region that they're in, but globally. Regulations play a difference there. So we kind of pay attention to the regulatory landscape. And then we have some really great data scientists and product managers that come up with some really awesome, if you build it, they will come kind of approaches sometimes too, right? So we kind of let the whole set of capabilities and perspectives come together to help us in shaping what our roadmap looks like. And then I guess we really do take a lot of assessment on what we are capable of doing on our own and where it really fits well with our company and determine if we should do an acquisition in that space as well.
Mm.
That's really interesting. Yeah, you already sort of touched on this when you mentioned how quickly things are evolving, or maybe Alex, it was you that mentioned that. But I mean, there's no denying that the threat and fraud side of things is evolving quickly. You've seen it all. And I mean, in fact, you haven't seen it all because now with AI, nobody knows what's really around the corner, right? It's things are changing so quickly. So, uh, how do you stay ahead of like the evolving threat of AI? And I guess as a two-part question, is that the biggest threat facing the identity industry right now, or is there something else that you've seen um, or that you see coming, perhaps?
So AI is definitely a threat that no one, I shouldn't say a threat. AI is definitely an opportunity and a threat, depending on how it's being used and who's using it.
Mhm.
So I think that is definitely a driver in our roadmap on how our products are evolving. We are incorporating AI, and we've used AI and machine learning for over 20 years in our solutions. So this is not a new area for us, and it's a great opportunity for us to really stand strong on the responsible use of AI. It also drove a lot of the IDVerse acquisition. We wanted to acquire IDVerse because it supports our global approach to watch the way that the identity verification space is evolving. And
Mhm.
so we saw that they had the ability to help us in continuing to address our global customer needs and to combat future fraud attacks, especially AI-driven fraud attacks. And so it's a combination of our strengthened technology and our analytics that allows us to be positioned, we believe, to address future fraud threats, whether they be from uh, generative AI in today's state or 5 years from now, the next threat attack.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned earlier also the regulatory need to keep up to date, which also ties into IDverse, at least from our perspective, because Tony and I talked to Terry Brenner from IDverse last fall at Identity Week.
Mhm.
Very knowledgeable guy, and he was all about just like the legal landscape. And I don't think we've ever spoken to somebody from an identity tech vendor who was so hyper focused on just the legal side of things. So I don't know. We probably can't base our assessment on one person, but it seems like with IDverse, you're getting like a group that probably has like a particularly solid grasp of regulatory issues.
I think it's very important to understand the regulatory impacts, especially when you have a solution that is global. Because every country, or in the United States, almost every state could have a different set of regulatory requirements. So paying attention to what is happening in a state, country, or region is going to be a very important aspect around not just AI, but also the use of biometrics, also privacy impacts. As you know, we also pay attention to data retention. All of those things have potential regulatory impacts that drive how we offer our solutions and how we continue to evolve them.
Mhm. Are you finding with like going back to AI, are you finding that there's a lot of panic or concern among clients? Like, are they coming to you constantly with questions about like, what are you doing about this? What are you doing about deepfakes? Or is it more like you're shepherding the conversation and you're kind of leading them to the solutions they don't even know that they need?
So I think that we're getting both excitement and about AI because there's so many opportunities for improved efficiencies for businesses.
Mm,
So they want to know how we're using AI to help in the automation of processes, to help streamline things. But then I'd say in the last 2 years, many businesses have started to see an influx of deep fake attacks and things that I have to admit, I thought were going to be more around somebody wanting to do a deep fake of Tom Cruise or Nicole Kidman,
mhm,
not of the regular individual. And fraudsters are embracing that technology now. So around 2023, all of 2024, we just continue to watch how more sophisticated fraud attacks became, how more difficult traditional solutions had at being able to detect an AI-generated face or a completely AI-generated ID document. And so it really does take an advanced capability that is starting from AI to be able to identify these types of fraud attacks. And so that's the one thing that customers are mentioning now because they're starting to see these happen and they want to have a solution that can help fight it.
That's really funny that you put it that way because it's so true, right? Like a year, maybe two ago, it was a case of like, oh man, yeah, look at that, Tom Cruise fake. I guess I'll have to be on guard next time I see something crazy a celebrity did because it could be faked.
Exactly.
And now it's like, oh, they're faking, an employee at a bank. And we talked about this in a recent episode we did with an AI expert, Cyrus Hodis from the OECD. And yeah, there's just, defrauding companies out of millions and millions of dollars because you fake people on a Zoom call or just gaining access into a system. And with AI, that's just becoming more and more commonplace, and that technology is in the hands of more and more uh, bad actors. So I was going to ask you, I mean, what do you think, or is there some sort of technological innovation since you've seen an evolution in the industry over almost 2 decades now that you're most excited about, but I kind of am getting the sense that the answer might be leveraging AI to fight these advanced threats. Is that the case?
So I definitely think AI is an important piece. I would say that we approach trying to address the risks that companies are encountering in multiple facets. First, we think that it's important to always look at the digital risk. So that's again, the device and how that device is being used, the physical risk. There is usually a real person behind all of this, right? So we want to know who that real person is when it's appropriate. And then the behavioral aspects that we've talked about. I do not believe there will ever be a magic bullet where there is one size fit all, one solution to solve all of this. AI is not going to be the answer automatically. And
Right.
so we believe in a risk-based, multi-layered approach that has, so we've continued to try to make our solutions as modular as possible because we want to fit all the different use cases across a customer's life cycle. So it might be a different set of capabilities that you need to have when you're trying to do a new account opening versus when you're trying to protect someone against an account takeover or when you're
Right.
trying to make it easier for a good customer to log in. All of those different scenarios, and we're going to have more and more payment transactions. Now we're starting to have our customers really challenged by not just an AI-based scenario, but just how fast things are nowadays, right? So real-time payments, the irrevocable nature of a transaction. People first started experiencing this with just doing regular peer-to-peer payments. But now we have the ability to have so many different types of real-time payments depending on where you are in the world. And we have customers that are really challenged by just the speed of how quickly a consumer may engage and not realize they're doing the wrong thing. And I'm sure you have experienced a lot more consumer education in general, where you're getting notices from your credit card company or your retailer of, did you really want to make this transaction? You feel
Mhm.
comfortable clicking here. So people are either paralyzed or they're ignoring it. One of the two things that are starting to happen, right? They get too scared to do something, or they're just over it because they're constantly being bombarded with these messages. But we definitely think that this is why we see an increase in scam activity. And scam activity uses everything we've already talked about. For example, just using AI to improve the way that text message looked, right? We used to be able to look for typos and incorrect grammar. Now your scams that you get, they all look wonderful, right?
Yeah.
You don't catch any of those. And countries that had not received those types of attacks because maybe their language was less that fraudsters, had maybe fewer people that spoke that language. Well,
Mhm.
with AI, they can scam you in any language. So
Yeah.
we're just seeing this happen globally, and it's a real challenge.
I'm really glad you mentioned that last point because when I see very clumsily worded fraud messages now that I get personally, I'm like, guys, come on. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
Do better,
ChatGPT is
right? Do
free.
better.
You can
You
use
get
it for
offended.
free.
Yeah.
What kind of fraudster are you, right?
That's what I'm like 2025.
Exactly, exactly.
But I,
No, I mean, it just makes the whole area around fraud so much, we always say it's a small world. It really is a small world when it comes to fraud because things that we used to see only happen in a certain region. Let's use synthetic identity fraud. When I first, we've been dealing with synthetic identity fraud since, I don't know, 2012, 2013, when we started noticing that identities were emerging without parents or things that just didn't seem logical in the way that these identities were coming up. And it was told to us that this is a US thing only. It's around the social security number. Well, guess what? Now, about 50% of businesses around the globe say that they are impacted by synthetic identity fraud. And it's not just around a social security number, it's all the combinations of ways that you can create a synthetic, and AI helps with that. So just watching the problem maybe start in a certain industry or in a certain region, and then it just is more pervasive. That's a big challenge.
Mhm. I wanted to ask earlier, you mentioned like the payments thing that globally you're seeing kind of people react to new security protocols and everything's happening so quickly. And I was just wondering, is there when we talk to people about, for example, the AI Act in the European Union, some vendors feel like it's actually hindering progress in some cases because there's too much regulation. I'm curious what your perspective is. Like, are there markets where you feel like LexisNexis Risk Solutions has a solution to a particular problem and just can't implement it because of regulatory issues? And I mean, hopefully the answer is no, but I'm curious.
Yeah, I am not aware of anything to that extent.
Mhm.
I also respect the regulations that are in place in a particular region. Perhaps there is a special need or a heightened sensitivity that culturally or that this is there for a reason.
Mhm.
So I guess maybe this is from my policy background. I'd rather try to understand and comply within the framework that's given to me.
Mhm.
And then if there's an opportunity to educate and improve the way that legislation has been set or a regulation has been created, then I by all means would love the opportunity to share those insights. But we really focus heavily on abiding by the rules in place and then educating to try to help improve the way that rules are created.
Mhm. Yeah, to be clear, I also like regulations.
Well, I
I'm
don't know if I like regulations. Don't get me wrong.
no,
I'm not
sure,
looking
yeah.
for a new regulation, but
I'm a bit self-conscious because we've had a few conversations lately where I've been like the devil's advocate for why are there so many regulations? So
well,
yeah.
I mean, it's hard because it takes patience, right? And so, and that's something that most people are short on.
Mhm.
So this is a long game, right? This is not something that, and that's hard for startups that need to see something quick happen. But we've been in this space for a long time. I've been in this space for a long time, and it's really evolving at the speed that your customers can and trying to go it faster than the fraudsters can. But sometimes it means that there's a lot of education that has to go on with government agencies, with businesses, with lawyers at your customers before you can ever have, because even if there's not a regulation there could just be a lack of an appetite for a particular business to want to do something until you've had time with their leadership team and their legal team. And those are the kind of things that you have to invest in.
Mhm. That makes sense. Um, I also, one thing that we've been bumping against in a few conversations lately is the role of organized crime in
Mm.
Mhm.
identity fraud. So, like, given your organization is operating at a pretty large scale and is well established, so I'm curious what your perspective is, like how that has changed. I'm sure many years ago there were probably organized crime groups making these physical fake IDs, but how do you see that translating into the digital space?
Well, now we've always approached organized fraud from not just being an individual, but a network of people. Even when it was a small network working off Craigslist or something kind of like that. But the bottom line is that most fraudsters do not operate alone. Some of them operate like corporations. And so we have always said it takes a network to fight a network. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we believe in shared intelligence amongst our customers. Most of our solutions allow for a fraud feedback loop, and then we find ways to share those insights, either from a network standpoint or from a consortium model where the UK banks can come together, or a couple of organizations in the retail space can work together. I mean, we try to help build those opportunities to share those insights. But the thing that we've seen with organized crime has been just how um, horrible the things that they can do. So they can be a part of a sex trafficking group. They can have scam farms, scam centers that are holding people almost hostage. Fraud can be really dangerous, not just from the standpoint of it costing money to businesses, but really harming the lives of individuals. And so really getting to the root and trying to stop fraud not just makes a better ROI or makes a business more profitable, but it really can save lives.
Mm. Is there some kind of mechanism when you're sharing this intelligence to get police involved? If you're like, oh, we just found like a really sophisticated fraud ring operating out of X. Is there a way to share that information with police, or are you sort of like, is that crossing a line somehow in what your organization's mandate is?
Yeah, so I don't feel like that's necessarily our role to help in the detection and investigation of our customers' data at all, right? So that is definitely not a place that we play. However, our customers definitely have relationships with their local federal law enforcement agencies, and it's very interesting just to watch the way that they choose to interact.
Mm. So I guess, Kim, are there any, we're like just about out of time. So are there any like final messages you want to leave our listeners with to think about in terms of the threat of fraud and your approach to tackling it, and just like what should people take away from this conversation top line?
So LexisNexis Risk Solutions empowers businesses to build trust in transactions, trust in identities. And I think the biggest thing that we are seeing in today's threat vector is that it's really important to apply AI-powered analytics to the data that you use, to the processes that you have, so that you can really address these emerging fraud attacks and look at things from a much more global standpoint. So we're just really excited to continue to try to innovate in this space, and to try to improve the security and the customer experience for our customers.
That's great. And I want to add to that, if I may. When you said earlier that your team has pretty much been looking at AI nonstop for the past year and change, that was very encouraging, because I'm somebody who is watching it just even out as a personal, like out of curiosity, and it's doing things I didn't think would be possible a year ago. It was doing things half a year ago that I didn't think were possible a year ago. So I'm glad to hear LexisNexis Risk Solutions is really keeping on top of that aspect as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to have this conversation.
Yeah, thanks for
It's been
taking
great.
it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Everyone.